evolve, Peeyush Pallav has joined us. He is the Executive Director of Natixis, and he is an alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIM Bangalore. He has an extensive experience in terms of finance, and he would be talking about that and his education at IIM Bangalore and IIT Bombay. Before the current position, he was the head for South Asia, South Pacific and EMEA for structured debt solutions in DBS Bank. And apart from that, he has a decade of other experiences, numerous awards to his credit. So without further delay, handing over virtually to Vivek sir so that he could continue the candid conversation from here. And thank you so much on behalf of the entire team. And
thank you, Aditi. Thank you, Aditi, for wonderful introduction. I welcome Peeyush. Thanks for doing this. Okay. Thanks for coming on board on this platform and guiding students on a Sunday morning in the hectic COVID schedule. So it's a pleasure to have you on board, and we look forward to a very warm interaction where we are adding, bringing as many insights from you as much possible to the student fraternity. So having said that, the first thing I like Peeyush to go straight away to you is, interacting with you, I found that very interesting the way you have continued to follow your passions and keep working on your passions with respect to your work life, and excel, and be it your schooling, IIT, and post graduation thereafter, your job, and being in such hectic schedule for maybe 20-25 years. So how do you go about finding passions? Okay, and I know you pursue excellence, and we all somewhere pursue excellence. So how what's your journey in to pursue your passions? And if these young students and executives could take some maybe snippets home on how can they pursue their passions and excellence straight away in pursuit of excellence. Yeah.
Sure, that's a very heavy question. So the pursuit of excellence is constant. It never stops. In whatever you do, whichever stage of life you're at, howsoever the circumstances that you're facing, requires you to have a heart. So you will find a lot of people who are focused, intelligent, driven, but they're not particularly effective in several of the things that they undertake to do. The things that set people apart are people, those who have a heart and who have empathy, who understand people, who notice how people behave, who are able to influence people positively. So having a heart is important. There is really no situation in which anyone would recommend any of the students to just be so focused on what they're currently doing that they forget to be human. And will keep coming back and through every crisis. Being human is extremely important. The second part of it is my experience with discovering what I was going to do eventually took its time. It required some patience. It required some sacrifices. Actually significant sacrifices. It required some faith in the future, and I was not in a rush. So it wasn't that I had gotten into a particular school, into a particular college for my engineering and for my MBA thereafter, that automatically dictated what I was going to do eventually. It was a very painstaking process to try and figure out what is it that I really enjoy. And I'll take a moment to actually dwell on that point a little bit more. It's easy to take on any project. It's easy to do any short-term, high-stress transaction or situation or just problem solving. But to do that persistently and over decades, that is simply not going to be possible if you do not have a passion for what you do. If you do not absolutely love what you do, it's going to be not possible to sustain that you can sustain it for a short while. Everyone is in the world is smart enough to take on a project and do a great job of it. If it's a 2-year project, it's fantastic. But to be able to sustain that drive and to be able to continue, you learn from the disappointments that you get, and you manage to celebrate with your team and with the people that you surround yourself with for every small victory that you get in that particular day. So discovering that passion, it will take time. It will not be automatic for many people. It wasn't for me. I went into schooling. I thought I was going to be good at music. I wasn't that good, but I learned music for 8 years. Didn't really pursue that path. I thought I was great at history. I'd read pretty much most of world history, or the books that were available to me. There were not that many books that were available in where I grew up. But every book that was available I'd already read by the time I was 11 years old. When I went into IIT, I thought in my second year that I'm going to be specializing in heat transfer. It was too early. It was too early for me to determine what I was going to specialize in: refrigeration, heat transfer. And by the third year, I thought that changed to fluid dynamics because I was fascinated by the subject. By the fourth year, however, I discovered what I really thought I was going to finally specialize in. It was operations research. I did a major project with the Indian Railways in Secunderabad for their Bombay-Baroda railway lines. It was fantastic. It changed the way I looked at business problems, and I looked at technology applications to solving those business problems. And I thought operations research was it. But it wasn't. Eventually, I went into management, and then from there, I started in sales. All this while, I was still discovering what is it that really fascinated me. And I had done options. I'd done my internship with Deutsche in Singapore, and I thought it was abstract. I thought it was a smallish effect, a smallish direct effect on the economy. And I was completely wrong about it. Eventually, I realized that it made the world move. And then I moved back into Fitch ratings. Started with the corporate ratings. I thought corporates, retail, power and gas. It was good to understand what drove those sectors. It was good to break down what impacted performances, understand the credit drivers, and so on and so forth. And then started on structured finance, which was very new in India at that point. But we did a great job of it. Over the next 3 years, I had an absolutely fantastic team. I had some people that most of them I'm still in touch with. They've done absolutely fantastically for the company in South Asia. And then I was transferred to Singapore, and I worked at a bank for the next few years. And every day, the thing that has not changed over the last 20 years is every day I'm still thankful for the work that I get to on that particular day.
I think wonderful answer, insights, Peeyush. So what you're saying is there is no fixed, let's say, direction but you have to give your best and keep exploring and keep finding what gets you there. So can we just get an inkling of what are your passions now? What drives you when you are so in depth into this particular role, and what is the key drivers here in the last few years specifically?
Sure. So in the last few years, I would say the context that we operate in within the Asia Pacific zone, many of the countries are capital deficient. Many of the countries need to import capital, export risk. And when I say that, it's probably because of historical reasons when they had to go through a bout of imperialism that drained some tax revenues from them, or that the modernizations didn't happen in time, or that there were other bureaucratic shackles that the economies had imposed on themselves before they broke down those shackles and liberated themselves from those. In this situation, in this context, the solutions to increasing productivity and increasing, therefore increasing the amount of growth you can generate in the economy and making the marginalized population slightly better off is by using your capital more efficiently. You're able to use the same amount of capital a lot more frequently. You're able to increase the velocity of money in particular economies. And you can actually see that effect. You put corporates, you put issuers, you put users, consumers of capital on a treadmill. They generate more returns. They use the same capital to deploy, grow, and use the returns to accelerate that process. And by virtue of accelerating that process, you allow the economies in this region to catch up.
Maybe a few key points. We have to keep in mind the context that we're operating in, which is Asia Pacific. We have to keep in mind the real problems that we face. Banks do not have enough capital to lend. Corporates therefore cannot borrow enough. There's a liquidity crisis that crops up from time to time. And you need to keep the lending going. You need to keep people employed. You need to help out in whatever way you can to generate as much economic activity for the marginalized populations, for the capital deficient economies, to continue growing and to pull people out of poverty. In that context, the work that we do, structured finance, securitizations, covered bonds, they play a very critical role in facilitating that capital, in facilitating that growth.
My next question here would be, so when you have worked so closely with India, and obviously you are an output from IITs and IIM, and have exposure in Indian markets as well as now obviously global markets. How do you see these two different from one, the structures available, okay, and two, the mindsets of the corporates also, and obviously regulations would be there. So completely free space for you if you want to add A, B, C, X variables also. Just please, guide us there. Yeah.
Firstly, India. I will just stick with India first, and then compare it to where I see some differences in the way we see international systems and processes. So within the Indian context, it's very easy to not realize when you are within the Indian system just how good that Indian system is. It's a large economy. It's a really large economy. A lot of people, a lot of good, talented people. The people that you grow up with, the people that you work with are enormously talented. You get to learn all through the way, all through the process. It's got a lot of things right in a very short period of time. It's got extremely strong institutions. The RBI is extremely strong. The judiciary is extremely strong. The democracy as an institution is extremely strong. So it's got the necessary ingredients to make things move, and it's doing a great job of managing the economy, given the massive challenge of coming out of British occupation in 47, and then trying to quickly catch up, trying to start realization for the economy, setting up steel plants and then structure, setting up educational institutions, all of which actually directly benefited me. So I have a lot of things to be grateful for. There are still regulations. There are still the way people are thinking about the Indian securitization markets, and I keep going back to the point. The country needs to export and import capital. It needs to monetize its loans, its housing loans that people have taken, auto loans that people have taken. It needs to monetize the corporate loans that have been extended to the SMEs. And for all of these, it needs to create those products and sell those products to international investors, which then give it the capital to do it a lot more. So it can build more houses, it can cars, the corporates can produce more and capex on and hire more. In that context, the regulations are not as evolved as the other economies are. There has been a positive move. There has been an increasing sense that something needs to be done to solve the capital problem for the public sector banks, to import more capital. So there is that realization that has come through, but not a lot of facilitating measures and facilitating liberalization measures have been taken so far. One of the key things which is missing from the Indian landscape today is covered bonds, where you could actually have a bunch of banks issue very competitively priced bonds, competitively priced debt instruments backed by mortgages and by some other assets, but starting with mortgages first. And you could actually use covered bond as a way of funding yourself through crises. And a lot of countries have done that. A lot of countries have benefited from it. India so far has not been able to do that. There's been some study before, but they've not really started on those products. So there is a lot of distance for them to cover, and there is a lot of help available. There's a lot of international investors. There's a lot of international talent which is available to develop these products for the country. Within the international context, the markets in the US are really well developed. The markets in Europe are fairly well developed. Asia is still catching up. China is growing quickly. In my space, for example, 10 years ago, both India and China would have been at 5 billion per year. Today, China is at 200 billion per year. India is still at 5 billion per year. So there's still growth. There's still a lot of things being done on a continuous basis in the region. There's a lot of work for people like us to do, and it's only a question of time before regulations in India become simple enough, become more friendly towards capital markets. As of now, they are improving, but there is a long way to go. Otherwise, I have to say India has some of the most talented professionals. So it's only a question of time; it will eventually get there.
So I think students would have had some difficulty here. So maybe I should have picked up what is structured finance before, though they are very sharp students and they would have got it. So if you can just highlight, what is structured finance, so they just are able to put two and two together.
The way we think about structured finance and securitizations, and it's a fairly vast subject. It would eventually become a very large part of markets when India is in a situation where it is more friendly to foreign capital, more friendly to foreign debt in particular, and more friendly to foreign secured debt for its banks and non-banks to be able to raise that debt. It will have these products a lot more. It also has covered bonds eventually. Although currently the focus seems to be on developing the securitization market, which is not the easiest to develop in the country. In a securitization, all that you do is you look at a particular cash flow stream, you try and monetize it into a format which can be sold. So you have, let's say you go to a private sector bank in India and you look at their portfolio of housing loans, which has been given out to, say, 10,000 individual borrowers. You take those loans, you assign them to a trust, and the trust issues certificates to international investors. At the moment, it's very limited. There's only INR, which is possible, only domestic investors, which benefit from the tax regime, because the taxation system for international investors is not clear, is fairly amorphous. And in fact, it's quite punitive towards developing that portion of the market. But when you do this exercise, when you take 1,000 loans and you put them into one trust, you basically are using statistical analysis to figure out what is the historical default rates, where is the eventual default rates going to be. Based on the current economic situations, you figure out what the prepayment rates are, how people are doing, what's their nature, how often do they refinance, when they get their bonuses, do they use the bonus to pay off their housing loans. You model for all of that. And when you model for that, you come with a certain amount of cash flow which can service a particular amount of debt with a degree of certainty. And that is the essence of it. So when you have that story, you take it to an investor and you say, look, with these stresses, with these reduction in rates, with this increase in default, you're still going to get your money back. So you should buy this bond. And when they buy this bond, the private sector bank gets the capital and it can lend a lot more than if it had not done this exercise. So therefore, that's essentially securitization, and you can carry that across many different streams. You can have leases, loans, and aircraft and containers, marine containers, and solar leases, and what have you. It's the principle of the same. The applications are enormously wide.
Right. Very interesting. So what we'll do now is we will move away a bit from finance. I think we had a very extensive discussion. We'll come back on it maybe later, and students will chip in. But tell us more about your childhood, see, because it's like such a beautiful, story, so tell us more about your childhood. What were your dreams growing up as a young boy? How was Bokaro like? And maybe till getting into IIT, the whole journey, the preparation, and whatever all happened in your childhood. That will be very interesting for all the audience to get some insights.
Again, Bokaro is a small city. It's a really tiny little speck. Not a lot of people would be familiar with it. But it is a beneficiary of the initial push towards industrialization. So essentially when Nehruji was setting up the steel plants in India, Bokaro, Bhilai, Durgapur, etc., and Rourkela for that matter, and the initial phase of technology was being brought in, this city developed as a nucleus around that steel plant, and the city was fairly well planned. It had its own captive power plants, so you would never see power losses. It had a very, very good schooling system. So I was lucky enough to first go to Holy Cross and then to Delhi Public School. It was a fairly predictable childhood. It was a fairly smooth growing up. I was just happy riding my cycle down the street, and it was a very, very good childhood upbringing. The one thing, however, which actually made the most impactful, or which had the most impact on my growing up, was growing up with a bunch of students who were exceptional. My seniors from school that I would learn from. I would benefit from surrounding myself with really sharp brains. Some of these guys have done exceptionally well. They had done exceptionally well even before when they went into IIT. They were always meant to do exceptionally well. And in that context, having those students as my mentors was probably the single biggest competitive advantage that we had, that at least I had growing up in the company, in the shadow of really, really brilliant. That philosophy then stayed with us. That philosophy of learning from your peers, learning from other people. When I was younger, it was a lot of pressure. It was almost as if I expected to know the answers. If there was a problem, I would treat the problem as if I need to know the answer and I need to tell people what the answer is. That I have moved away from. I need to just make sure that we find good answers, and we find good answers collectively. We find good answers as a team. But in that process of getting that maturity level, in the beginning there is a lot of pressure, and that pressure was through my childhood as well. It was almost as if people just expected, oh yeah, sure, you'll get into IIT, but that's not the point. The point is, what rank will you get? And later I was thinking, it's just absolutely the wrong way of going about it. The right question to ask me would have been, what do you want to study at IIT? Rather than what rank will you get at IIT? So, that pressure did do a couple of things. One is it brought out the drive. So you were not scared of any competitive exam at all. It just didn't matter what competition you were going to face. It was going to be just another day. At the same time, you could not allow yourself to just be so narrowly focused on one thing that your ability to understand the rest of the universe disappears. When I say that, I was continually in debating. I was continually in the dramatics team. I was the vice head boy for the school. I was taking an extra amount of time to excel at the extracurriculars, and those made a huge difference to my ability to interact with different sets of people in different cultures. And that probably adds a lot of value that I would leave with the students today. While you're growing up, while you're going through intense pressure situations, please keep an eye out own everything extracurricular as well. It is not one at the expense of other. It is both, and you need to just find time to do both. That finding time philosophy will always exist. You will always have to optimize the limited number of hours you have. You will always have to allocate the limited number of hours to the things that you like. But that optimization process is long. There is no solution that at least I have not discovered a solution which solves all the time allocation problems that I've faced all my life. In that situation, I would probably just say I was fortunate to go to the school which allowed me to develop a lot of other hobbies, which allowed me to focus on music, which allowed me to focus on academics while not compromising on everything else that goes into a reasonable worldview formation when you're still a student. And I would suggest very strongly that students do not give up on understanding the world around them just to focus on one particular competitive exam or to focus on one particular stream of work.
Great, Peeyush, you answered 3 of my questions. Okay, so I'll straight away move to your IIT Bombay experience and taking this thing forward. So, what was the impact of IIT Bombay as far as your career is concerned? How did you expose yourself and arrive at this decision that you want to pursue an MBA? Because a lot of audience, today obviously are always confused whether to go it now or maybe later at work exam. Obviously, it's linked to the opportunities around them. So, how did you expose yourself? How was the experience like? How did you expose yourself? And maybe if there are any tips for the students who are in the graduation or maybe when they work at, so how do they find balance this and find their calling, and decide.
So when I was getting into IIT, I was already in 2 minds whether I wanted to get into IIT. I had a scholarship at that point from Singapore, from Singapore Airlines and Neptune Orient Lines to study computer science in Singapore in some of the good universities here and get a scholarship for free. At that point, it looked like a fairly attractive option, and yet Singapore at that point was already fairly developed. IIT was an institution which had a very long legacy, had produced some of the most phenomenal minds of that time when I was still getting into IIT.
Great. So how was your IIM Bangalore experience?
Oh, it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. That's where you realize we had some brilliant professors in strategy. We had some brilliant professors in finance. And not surprisingly, these 2 became my 2 most favorite subjects because the professors were just really very good. With that, though, the one thing that IIM Bangalore does teach you is, you make lifelong friends in while you're doing your MBA. You're not just there to get the education. You're not there to get the tools. You're there to make relationships, and till date, those relationships matter. They matter because you're able to relate to them. You're able, no matter what pressure, no matter what situation you face, no matter what crisis you have to go through, you're able to relate to a set of people who went through similar experiences, similar formative experiences with you, and therefore that is very good for your emotional health. It's good to have those friends for emotional health. I was extremely fortunate with even my school, and I pretty much talk to them almost every week, if not more frequently, with the people that I was growing up with. And it's again those snatched moments. You don't really have the ability to plan and execute it, but let's say you're driving from one place to another and you have a 5-minute window, you can extract that 5 minutes to do to catch up. So it's a great emotionally stabilizing effect to have those friends. Other than that, the other thing that Bangalore did teach me was that you need to, while you're going through it and while the subjects are extremely interesting and you want to get into it as much as possible, you need to still optimize. You need to optimize your time. You need to allocate your time. You need to have fun. Because if you, at any point in life, if you're not having fun, it is not sustainable. It's not just not sustainable. If you're not having fun, you're not going to be fun for the other people that are working with you or for you or that you work with. And that's not, again, very, in the long term, that's not very sustainable. So you need to have fun, you need to enjoy what you're doing, you need to learn, and you need to continuously learn. I think since the day I've graduated, pretty much all along, I've been fortunate in finding things to pick up from the press, from literature, from research, from what have you. It's just been very fortunate. The world's offered me enough opportunities every day to learn something new. And I'm very grateful for that.
So we'll just take, it's kind of running short time. So we'll just take and explore more of your personal life. How has your personal life been? The journey of getting married, kids, and how rewarding it has been. And if the whole act and any tips, for all these youngsters would somewhere be pursuing very intense careers. So yeah, we'll love to take hints from your personal life and obviously how rewarding it is, because eventually that's also very important, or maybe very more important, right? So yeah,
definitely. So I always like to say, whenever you're thinking about prioritizing, because you'll perpetually about prioritizing, there's no way you can have everything, because there's simply not enough resources, and that's the whole basis of the systems that we operate in, that resources are scarce. That's the first principle. Time is scarce and you have to allocate time. The idea of being great at a particular thing because you devote most time to it is some, and the reason I say that is every other aspect that challenges your brain in ways that your own field of work does not, helps your own field of work. Eventually you will figure that out, that you need to have a brain that, but it's not sufficient to just have a heart. I got married in 2008 to a beautiful wife. I have a 7-year-old beautiful daughter and 1.5-year-old son. Again, it's always challenging. It's always painful. You will spend. Last year, I was Sunday to work in Hong Kong office, flying back every Saturday. I was traveling for work to Australia, to the US, to Europe, to London, wherever, and I was spending most of my time away from family, but for the weekends, and I think that priority is important, because at the end of the day, you will go through some good times and you go through some really bad times, but the family will stay and the family will be there with you. So you need to give it the suitable importance that it deserves. There is really nothing more important than family, and below family, then I think about the people that I work with, about my colleagues, about my team, and below that the company that I work with, and how do I continually innovate for them? How do I continually create new products that benefit clients, that benefit countries, that benefit economies, that benefit the man on the street? How is he better off? And in that order of priority, I would allocate my time on any given day. There will always be challenges, and this is one thing which I have learned. There's just no shortcut to time optimization. You just have to smash the moment. You have to make sure that you're well physically. You have to make sure that you are able to exercise, you get your spots. Even if it's golf or what have you, or cycling or swimming, and you need to make sure that your body is supporting your brain. You need to make sure that your soul is well fed and that your family is taken care of, and by making sure that the physical health, the mental health, the emotional health is all taken appropriate care of, you eventually become a lot more productive than if you were to just focus on one particular aspect of it. And I think it's probably not that obvious when you're very young, but the greatest challenges that you will always be mental. It's not you will need to dig deep and come up with the last ounces of your resourcefulness, perseverance to see things through. It's in that context, if you're not taking care of your emotional health, or if you're not taking care of your physical health, it's going to be really, really difficult to be as productive as you possibly can. The other thing is the world that we live in. I graduated from IIT, there was the .com crash. I graduated from IIM, there was a SARS crisis. I moved to Singapore, there was even crisis. I moved to Hong Kong, there were protests and COVID, and so every time there will be challenges. You need to be resilient to cope with challenges and convert those challenges into opportunities. It's a question of mental frame of mind, but it helps to have that positive mental frame of mind if you have addressed the other nutrients that the positive requires.
Great. I think more or less this sums it up. So we'll take some few quick questions, and you take your time to answer them, and then we move to Aditi. One first question is, what are your passions other than work?
I was firstly, I have to say my passion is my work. I really love what I do. It's very fulfilling to be able to create new transactions for the problems that a lot of people would not have attempted to solve, or create new transactions for clients and help clients in really making massive progress despite their particular situations. So it's the first passion, of course, is work. I used to read a lot. I can't read much anymore, except maybe if I'm in a flight, or if I spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes before I go to sleep. I try to sleep a lot more currently. Earlier all through my 30s, I was averaging maybe less than 4.5 hours. 5. Now I try to extend it to at least 5.5 hours and take more time to sleep. So I try and optimize around that as well. So I still read a lot of books, but I can't read even a small fraction of everything that I want to read. So I select a few and I go through them. I like to go out for golf. I like to go out for skiing. Again, it's not possible to go skiing very often. I like golf on Saturday mornings. That's a good break. That allows you to disconnect from whatever you're working on at the moment. Music is great. I do take time in the night after office hours. I try cycling and listen to music at the same time. Again, get a bit of fresh air, a bit of exercise, and a bit of music as well. So yes, there are a lot of interests. There are very few passions. Within those, I try to do the best.
Great. Traits, to success. Any traits, thumb rules to be successful?
There are a few. So when I think about people that I have liked in the professional setting, there are a few common characteristics. One is reliability. So if I think about someone, the question I ask myself is, in a crunch situation, will I be able to rely to or him or her to pull through, to do what's challenging physically, mentally, to be able to push through. The second thing I think about is that person someone that that I would want to work for? Even if I'm hiring a person, I would always think about it in terms of, is that a person that I want to use as a benchmark as to what a leader with a heart should be. And that's usually very, very, very useful. What it then tells me, to be successful, you need to have the ability to trust. You need to have the ability to to have some empathy with the team, to be able to relate to the team, to be fair, to everyone that you deal with, to be fair to all the stakeholders that you deal with, not just shareholders at the expense of employees or clients at the expense of financials. You need to balance all. You need to balance those stakeholders, and you need to. At the end of the day, you need to have a heart. You need to be a good human being. So I'm not particularly. I'm not particularly saying that you can't be very successful if you're super intelligent. But what I'm saying is that it really helps in addition to working super hard, being super good at what you're doing. You're also a good person. That really does make a big difference.
Great. Essentially, what you are again and again saying is that 70 hours of work a week is a lifetime thing. You shouldn't worry about it. And focus on the others.
True. It will. At some point though, it's not stressful. It's not stressful to spend those 70 hours. Yes, there have been instances when I couldn't get up from a chair for many hours, much more than 24 hours, when I'm on a particular transaction, for a couple of days sometimes. Straight from my IIT, when I was trying to finish a project, it took 2.5 days on one chair. To 2017, when I was doing a transaction for refinancing, which was due on a particular date, we had to print the information memorandum, and I could not leave the chair on Friday and on Saturday till I finished it on Sunday morning. So this is part and parcel of life. Yes, but it is not stressful if you're enjoying what you do. If you find fulfillment in what and if it intrigues you, if it is interesting enough, if you enjoy solving problems with teams. For every new transaction that I try to do, there are maybe 20 different teams that get involved in some way. There's legal, there's compliance, there's credit, risk, there is business management, there is settlement teams, there are syndicates, there are sales teams, there are client coverage teams, and all those teams need to eventually get towards a particular goal and agree on a particular process for you to be able to see that. But if it gives you joy to solve problems together, it's not stressful. Hard work is a given. There's no solution. There's no substitute for hard work. There will never be a substitute for hard work.
Right. One final question, which I always ask, because this is something for me also. So, any books you recommend?
I think my worldview was formed earlier when I was reading a lot of history books. It's important to know your history. It's important to know what mistakes people made and how people behaved in certain situations, because we are very often, if you're not aware of what mistakes were made in the past, it's possible that our history forces us to repeat those mistakes. So it's good to read a lot of history. Of late, though, I don't really get a lot of time to read. I like a few books which deal with risk. I like a few books which deal with chance and probabilities. So I would prefer to read those. Some of my favorites are from Taleb. He does a beautiful job of explaining the role of chance, and the role that chance plays in our lives. A lot of us do not give it as much credence or as much importance as we need to. It is just absolutely amazing the degree of the role that chance plays, and the way you think about chance, the way you think about the impact that chance events will have on your life, on your livelihoods, on the economy and the world, and how do you adapt to it? There's no becoming resilient, but how are you automatically going to be able to convert those chance events and deal with the impact in a way that benefits humankind or benefits future generations. There are a lot of interesting books that come out. I'm reading Harari's Sapiens and Homo Deus, and I'm reading Armchair Economist and a few other books as well. So it's not as many, but there are some really brilliant minds out there that we deserve to spend some time with, and what better than to read those books.
Thanks a ton, Peeyush. Very, very, I would say, insightful discussion for me. I have made a whole page of, my lessons from this. Okay, so before I give it to Aditi, I'll just summarize my learnings. To start with, one is being socially aware and what's happening around, and being empathetic to people. It came out very, very strong early in your conversation itself. Hard work is a journey, so it's a part of life. We have to accept and live with it. Now we have to find fulfillment in what we do. So if we are enjoying what we are doing, I think the rest all follows. Don't be scared. Explore, and identify and pursue your passions. Okay, keep looking for it. You might not find it today. Time optimization. Okay, a huge thing, but yeah, it is a continuous process again. So you might not always find the right balance, but yes. Mental and emotional health. We neglect this aspect a lot, but yeah, we have to, as we go up in our career, we have to keep finding, ways to focus on our mental and emotional health. Mentors are all around us. Our batchmates, our seniors, our colleagues, they are all around us, and we need to see what we can get out of them, and that's very humbling from someone with your pedigree, from a continuous achiever, to come in and say and even credit these mentors for your achievements. So which is, I think, the humility of it also is a lesson. And be resilient. Challenges will come on your way, and there is a great chance that those may actually turn out to be opportunity. So keep looking for that. I think that is my learning from this. Thanks a ton. And
Thank you.
I'll pass it to Aditi and let students take over.
Yes, thank you so much, both of you, for this very insightful conversation that we just had. Looking at the time crunch, I would directly jump on to the questions.
Hello, sir. Prachi Sheth here. Sir, if someone like me wants to pursue a career in finance, so what are the checkpoints we should keep in mind, and what is the more scope? Where is more scope in this field? As our Indian financial market is at a developing stage, so what do you recommend, sir?
There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do in India. The fact that it is in a developing stage means that it requires talent. It is already a very large economy, so there are several other economies which will have slightly easier regulations to work with, which will have more documented clarity, more stable regimes, etc., that we will work with. But those will be smaller economies, and therefore the volume of work in India is that much higher. But in terms of the checkpoints in finance, if you're serious about pursuing a career in finance, and if you're willing to put in the hours, if you're willing to make those life choices, and trust me, there will be times when you will repent it. The only way you derive happiness out of it is if you're really interested in finance. And it's not. You may see a lot of people talk about finance. You may see things that you really like and things that you don't like from some of the movies that were recently made about, especially our business. But it's not. The reality really is a lot of hours. The reality really is a lot of hard work and a very high pressure hard work. So you're not just dealing with a project solution. You're dealing with changing markets. You're dealing with changing client requirements. You're dealing with different prices as you formulate your plans, and you need to be adaptable in that small time. You need to be able to reinvent very, very quickly, and you need to be able to respond to changing conditions, which respond very frequently. There's a deluge of information out there. If that fascinates you, if you're able to make sense of different developments and understand the impact of each of those developments and what it means for you and for for your country and for your economy, then that's probably the right field to pursue. In terms of checkpoints, I would say you need to have a fairly good understanding of, first, being able to model for things, being able to create a model on Excel for any given scenario, and be good at it. Two, you need to be able to have an understanding of what drives industries, what drives credit, what drives results, why are the way they are. Third, you need to understand the impact of environment. What's going to happen with the corona crisis? Who's going to be able to survive and who's not? And what businesses will change and how will they change their business models? And how do you supplement? How do you support those clients that are going through a change in their business model? What happens to the field that you're going to choose? If you're getting into consumer banking, what happens with the technology or the technology companies when they decide to get into consumer banking? What happens to the banks at that stage? Or trade finance, what happens when that gets disintermediated? Or whichever field of finance you decide to specialize in, you need to keep an eye on evolving situations, on evolving technologies, on evolving circumstances, and be able to adapt to that. It's always a moving goalpost. There is really, if you had just a 3-point checkpoint that you could cross through, I would lay it out for you, but I really can't, because it's really a very moving goalpost, and you just continually have to work towards it.
Okay, so that was very insightful, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Prachi.
In continuation to that, Manav, you want to go next with your question?
Go ahead.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, sir. So it was, thanks a lot. First of all, it was a very informative session. So, sir, I have 2 questions. My first question is, as we know that finance is the blood of economy, and so is technology in this era. So, what changes would we see in the field of finance in the near future?
A lot of CEOs get paid a lot of money to answer that question. But some of the changes are fairly obvious. We don't really have to think too far in understanding the role of technology. Well, when you think about let's take one part of finance. Let's take credit. When you think about credit, the way to make a credit decision is to determine the ability and the willingness to pay of the borrower. And to do that, there are several tools available. So if you're looking at a corporate, you have the ability to figure out how much debt it has, what's its free cash flow, what's debt EBITDA, how much can it really do on capex, where is it currently rated, when it does the capex, does it fund it by debt or by equity or by hybrids or what have you, what its growth plans are like, and then project it and then figure out how it's going to service the debt that it's going to take. Or if you're thinking about individuals, then you figure out the individual's salary and his disposable income and take out the expenses that he needs to incur, and from the disposable income, how much can he allocate towards paying the debt, whether he's looking to buy a house or a car or what have you, and that has his capacity to pay. His willingness to pay is also the price of the house, how much has he already paid as a down payment, and how much does he need to pay in the future, and so on and so forth. And then do that analysis on this. So when it comes to the role of technology, there are some parts which are already very useful, and which is in terms of technology enabling the distribution or dissemination of information, technology enabling the distribution of loans, reducing the paperwork, reducing the hassles that the millennials have to go through when they apply for a loan. Just read from some common parameters, go through their income statements, connect directly to them, have some APIs with the banks, which allows you, or with the tax authorities, which allows you access to that information, etc. So that portion is already done. The portion that is increasingly being done by a lot of the technology platforms is the decision making itself. And they're using AI to adapt to that decision making. That will get better because that's AI. It needs to get better. The more information it gets, the more execution results it sees. It adapts to the decision making to respond to changing conditions and to respond to the eventual outcomes of the decisions that it has made. And those variables keep changing. You keep adding those variables. You keep reading different macro variables and putting it on the engine, and that decision making will improve over time. At least that's the hope. It is very powerful. That AI technology is very powerful, and it will play an increasingly large role in decision-making process itself. Now, what else would happen? There are some parts which are still fairly clunky. Settlements are fairly clunky. So when you use technology to make settlements slightly easier, you can see that happen already. Smart contracts from technology will come in. So all of these trends are visible. There are some companies which are doing a great job of it. Over time, though, there will be some businesses which will still require individuals to be creative to find financial solutions for. And this is because there's no substitute for creativity. You can solve the processes, you can solve for information, you can solve for facilitating the funds flow, but you will need to still be creative to create that kind of a fund flow that suits a particular requirements, or to innovate a particular fund flow that suits particular countries or particular banking systems, or in some cases where there's no information, you go into a new country and there is no credit scoring, there is no historical price for properties. You need to be still able to make those decisions. You need to be able to be innovative to be able to make those decisions. So in a way, yes, there's a lot of changes in the way finance is evolving with technology, but at the same level, there will always be requirements for people to be creative around the technological solutions deployed for financial uses.
Thank you, sir. So, considering this, can we go for investment banking? Like, can you give us a basic understanding on investment banking? And can we consider it as an option, career option?
Well, I hope that some of you do. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult for investment banking to find the talent. So yes, of course, investment banking is a good career choice. There are some pros and cons. The pros are that it allows you to be creative, it allows you to be focused, it allows you to be at the top of your game. The cons, however, are that it is really long hours. It's a lot of sacrifices, and it is extremely competitive. It's extremely difficult. There are so many variables which will change. There are so many crises that you will face, and you will still have to dig deep and find solutions to help everyone around you, to be able to help your team, to be able to help your clients, and to be able to be with your clients to navigate the crisis. So it's a great career choice, but you just need to be prepared to pay the price to be in investment banking. That said, it offers enormous learning opportunities. It's in terms of the information flow that you get, it's great. One of the big things about banking is the amount of information you have access to, the amount of information that you get access to because you deal with people who make the decisions is enormous, and you're able to make sense of it. It really helps you grow, but it also helps you develop expertise in different areas. So if, for example, in my narrow field within investment banking, if I was to focus on, and I'm saying this is a narrow field within investment banking, if I was to focus on marine containers, I would be focusing on trade issues. I'd be focusing on what's happening in China's intra-regional trade. I'd be focusing on China, US, what's happening to containers, where do they go, where do they end up, where do they get redeployed, etc. If I'm thinking about aviation, I'd be thinking about aviation leasing, where are the aviation leasing hubs coming up, who are they leasing to, which countries, which airlines, what is the concentration risk. If I'm thinking about real estate, I'm thinking about demand, immigration, I'm thinking about prices, I'm thinking about economic activity in the region, etc. If I think about housing loans, I'm thinking about something like a corona crisis. What happens? What's the option available for people whose jobs have been impacted? What's the option available for forbearance? What's the option available for the central bank? How much money does the government have to be able to subsidize some of the economic activity, etc., etc. So in every field of investment banking and in every field of that field, you will have a lot to think about and a lot to learn, and a lot of information to learn from. So I would very highly recommend that as career choice.
Great. Thank you so much, Manav, for asking those questions, and thank you, Peeyush, for answering them. Moving on, it's Peeyush asking Peeyush. So, Peeyush, you want to go on camera and pose your question?
I'm currently in final year of engineering, and means I'm literally confused if I should work and explore my interests or do an MBA right now, or I should explore my interests and then do a MBA after getting some work sort of.
Right, that's a tough one. The one thing I would say is that there is really no substitute to finding what interests you. And if it's the MBA process itself that helps you find what's interesting, because you get exposed to marketing, you get exposed to strategy, you get exposed to finance in a very short period of time, and you get to interact with really intelligent people around you, then so be it. If it is a work experience that allows you to figure out different streams of work across manufacturing, production, sales and marketing, or just finance, it doesn't matter. If that allows you to figure out what interests you, then that's fine as well. There's really not a fixed path. The truth of it, though, is that you really do need to find what interests you, because it's going to be with you for a very long time. So if you're not interested in it, it's going to be very difficult. Spend the time, take your time to find it.
On behalf of Bhavin Bakroya, I want to just pose this question to you. He says, how does it feel to have the IIT-IIM tag? Does the world around you change, or do you change as a person?
Well, yes, you change as a person, for sure. IIT was an enormously humbling experience. When you go to an IIT, school's easy. There's hardly anything that you don't understand, or problems that you can't solve when you're younger. When you go into IIT, it's not that you can't solve the problems. You meet those people who solve the problems in a fraction of time and a fraction of space that you take to solve those problems. And then you realize, these people are just significantly better than you are, and you try and learn from it. So it's very humbling. It's for some people like me, and I wasn't exceptionally good. So for people like me, it was an enormous opportunity to learn from some of the great minds that I saw at IIT, and I still learn from them till today. People who are making supercomputers and giant routers for data servers in Google and what have you. So I still learn from them. IIM was a little bit of a smartening process, because that's where you get exposed to so many different things. And the first semester itself, you realize just how important it is to optimize your time allocation for every different thing, for different subjects, for different projects, for different teams. If you're not good at optimizing your time, if you devote too much time to one thing and too little to the other, you immediately pay the price for it. So IIM was a lot more sparkling process. But once you've graduated from it, once you've taken those elements and imbibed them in your own personality, you practically never think about the IIM. In fact, on a regular day in the last 2 years, I don't think even a single day would have happened when I would have thought about the degree per se, the IIT or the IIM degree per se. That's just never entered my mind.
Right. So I would just sum up a couple of questions that we have received. Karan Kanakra, Preeti Oza, and a lot of other people have asked on similar lines, and that is, how do you stay focused, or how do you stay motivated and develop a mindset that makes you a problem solver and keeps you motivated towards your goal as you battle all these challenges? What's your take on keeping the motivation up?
It goes back to what I said earlier, Aditi. One, you need to spend the time, no matter how expensive that time is. You need to spend the time for your emotional well-being, for your mental well-being, and for your physical well-being. If you don't spend it, if you don't put in those investments, it's going to get difficult when the situation is difficult. When I was graduating from IIM, it was a scenario that we'd never. Some people would have seen in '92, but we were too young in '92 to see that scenario of the SARS crisis pan out. We did okay. In 2008, when Lehman went down, every day was a different day. Every day we learned something We saw the world change in ways that we just couldn't imagine would happen. It was a great learning experience. It was a very tough period. The way to deal with these tough periods really, I don't have a formula for dealing with these crisis situations or a shortcut that would help you deal with these crisis situations. But what does really help to keep in mind is that there will always be a tomorrow, that there will always be requirements, that there will always be clients who will have to do business as they navigate the crisis and as they grow after the crisis. And you have to help them. You have to do whatever you can to help whoever you can do a better job of navigating the crisis. And when you dig for that in your heart, that automatically addresses some of the problems that the crisis would put on or the strains that the crisis would put on your brain. At the end of the day, I find having a positive attitude really does help. Being a little bit more optimistic and thinking that you will survive, you will see tomorrow, and you will do a better job of tomorrow, because it's not the end of the world. It almost never is the end of the world. When you think that way, automatically your brain refocuses on what can do better right now for people that matter to you right now, and that helps. That helps quite a bit to stay focused on whatever you're trying to do.
I think there couldn't have been a better way to end this conversation. And looking at the time that we are going towards, I think we would wrap this up with one final question, and that would be, what's your final take-home message for the students who are watching us?
My final message is, maybe if I was to point that one, use mentors. There are truly exceptional people in the world. You learn a lot. Some of the best transactions I've ever done were only possible because somebody had attempted it 15 years before I had, and I build on that. So remember to build on, because our future evolution depends on us being able to build on what's been done. 2, take care of yourself. Work hard, but take care of yourself, and have a positive of mind to contribute to the world. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do to improve the conditions that you see around you, and the world needs that talent. The world needs you to pull through to help improve the conditions. And 3, there is really no substitute to having a good heart and helping and having some empathy and need. All that you do at the end of the day is still people, it's still flesh and blood. So you're working with flesh and blood, and you have to realize that it's not just an Excel sheet that you're working with. At the end of the day, the real impact is on people, flesh and blood. And that really puts things first.
Thank you so much. Vivek sir, any final word?
No, I think it was a fantastic discussion, great insights, and in the question answer it keep coming in. So I think thanks a lot. A wonderful message, great final points to end. Thanks Peeyush for doing it, and I think students found it great value, and look forward to more interaction and taking this forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Aditi, and thank you everyone for listening through. Good luck with everything that you've decided to do. The world needs it.